Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, martial arts fans all over the world, my name is Robert Huddleston, and today is the 80th birthday of the man, the myth, the legend, Bruce Lee. And I stress the man, the myth, and the legend because he was certainly a man, but he was as much, or if not more, myth and legend than maybe any character in the 20th century. Like, certainly in the age of photographs and film, like someone who's captured on film. There's He only made a handful of films, 4 or 5 films. Was only ever in a couple of fights. Chael Sonnen erroneously said he never fought anybody. He uh he was in some sanctioned boxing matches in China, which he won. Cleaned up a European champion in his youth. I believe did some freestyle grappling against some Greco-Roman wrestlers, and certainly had some point competitions both in I guess you would say broad traditional karate. It wasn't kung fu. It was point style rules in San Francisco, and then an infinite amount of that potentially in China under paleo wushu, right? Whatever the sport, whatever the contact would have been, their sparring, whatever you can be an amateur in American kickboxing, and no one ever ranks you as a fighter. And you've next to the guy who's never been in a fight, been in 1,000 fights. So, did Bruce Lee ever fight? Sure. We can prove he did some fighting. It was his philosophies that made mixed martial arts. He didn't invent it. Mixed martial arts was invented by the Greeks thousands of years ago. It was called pankration. Um, and it wasn't the blending of any styles. It was, I'm going to hit you with my limbs, or I'm going to wrestle you, and I'm going to choke you or break your limbs. And that's all mixed martial arts is, just put in the format of a sport or a teachable science. So Bruce Lee never competed in mixed martial arts, but he wore mixed martial arts gloves in the beginning of Enter the Dragon, and did an armbar. So he was a competent grappler. I mean, way competent grappler for his time, considering grappling wasn't his art. Way ahead of his time for a kung fu guy to be pulling off arm bars. It's hard to say what the guy did. Because if you ask the average person, they're going to say, man, Bruce Lee would beat up anybody. Bruce Lee would do great today in MMA. That's a big debate, like how well we have a 135 and 145 pound class. That's where Bruce Lee ran around most of his adult life. He got up to 160, I believe, at one point. Said he didn't care for how he felt. He felt like he was too heavy. So he's a 135, 145 pound guy, 5'7", 5'8". We have those guys. There's divisions of those guys. Cody Garbrandt, first one come to mind. He's 5'8", runs around between 125 and 135. Talented dude. Demetrius Johnson, he's like 5'3". Incredible martial artist. Do everything Bruce Lee ever did in theory at 125 pounds. Did it at 135, and I believe he dabbled at 145. Uriah Faber's been a lifelong 145 or 135er. Box you, kick you, wrestle you, grapple you. Could Bruce Lee do all of those things? Yes. Could he do them against any one of those guys I just named? No. No. Now, if he had been born today and had the ability to train the same way, like go to a jiu-jitsu gym and train that with the intent of taking and stopping a double leg, standing up and throwing an elbow, and look to trip, push on the fence, and throw somebody down into side control, sure, he could theoretically have trained all of that and done well. But just to pluck a prime Bruce Lee out of the early, mid-1960s, late 1960s, where do you think the man's prime would have been, and throw him into 2019 bantamweight contendership, he'd get killed. The concept of fighting for 25 minutes was never a thing. He boxed, which you might do 30 minutes at the highest level. He never boxed 12 or 15 3-minute rounds. If he did kung fu drills like that, he certainly never was in a fight with people's eyes on. Like his famous fight against Wong Man Jack in San Francisco was a minute long, 1 minute. And the whole thing was he could dispatch this guy in a minute. There's guys that fight full steam ahead now for 25 minutes with the highest level of martial competence. That just didn't even exist. It would be like trying to have the greatest gunfighter of the Old West have a shootout with just any U.S. Marshal today. Not fair. Not even. You're not dealing with the same concepts of technology. So how tough was Bruce? I think Chael was right when he said he convinced a bunch of actors to tell the directors, to tell the world that he was tough. But I've known dudes my whole life who have, like, first of all, I've read every Bruce Lee book, I think. And then I meet a dude who has like another Bruce Lee library I didn't even know about. I hear tales that Bruce Lee took steroids, ate balls of hashish, did mountains of cocaine, would have a dumbbell that would be half his body weight in each hand, that he could beat up guys bigger than him, that he could be a competent martial artist today. His wife didn't help, made the movie The Dragon, where his fight with Wong Man Jack that took place in a YMCA in front of a crowd. It was like in a dungeon, and there were like elders up in the top, and it was like Mortal Kombat. And she alleged that's where his back was broke, that Wong Man Jack snaked him, kicked him in the spine. He broke his back like Olympic lifting. So, did I want to believe he was, say, oh, I'm not making the claim he was on steroids. He's done some steroid-like feats. And I've said that to purists, and they're like, well, no, he can't do that. And I'm like, well, he also didn't break his back fighting Wong Man Jack. He fought Wong Man Jack a couple of times. They allege he fought like 200 people on the set of Enter the Dragon. Was it? I know guys who've been in 200 fights. For somebody who's never been exposed to the concept of violence, 200 fights seems mythical. I come from a town where a lot of dudes I know have been in more than 200 fights. There was nothing mythical or magical, or like, a lot of them look like they've been in 200 fights. So it makes me question the validity. Did Bruce Lee win all 200 fights and come away scratchless in the face? Were they, again, how legit would those fights have been? I don't know, like, the guy was a martial arts phenom in the sense of thinking ahead and training. He used to have grippers built, basically a steel square, actually, with springs attached to his fingers. He'd have people he trained weld him apparatus. He was always trying something new. Was way ahead on, like, drinks, like trying to drink his nutrition because he couldn't eat enough. Would be typing and have the push-up pads that just zap you all over, zapping him the whole time. So when I hear that he'd go to all those extremes in a day before steroids were illegal, or that cocaine was maybe not illegal, hashish was maybe not illegal, depending. Looking at those from a performance-enhancing, yeah, I could see Bruce Lee taking all those. So, it's Bruce Lee's 80th birthday, and I didn't answer a question about him. I posed about 1 million. We know he was in some movies. We know he could allegedly fight and was a great weightlifter, was a great sports scientist, was a great martial philosopher in his time. Did he get in 200 fights? Did he get in 1,000 fights? I don't know about it. He never, like, summoned the dragon and threw a Hadouken. I don't think he summoned the dragon. But was he able to do superhuman feats? Could he beat modern athletes today? I don't know about all that. Great actor. His movies were great for the time. I don't sit and like watch Bruce Lee movies now and amazed by them. But they allege that he was in some scenes so fast they had to slow down film. We know there's dudes that fast today. People possess that ability. We weren't exposed to it the way Bruce exposed it to us, or We were, like there wasn't a sports science with Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather and, Andre Ward on there throwing lightning fast punches. You're like, oh, it's not kung fu magic. There's just athletes out there that are fast. Bruce Lee was probably one of those athletes. Hard to say. He didn't go become a world champion or anything. He didn't, his philosophy was not to become a world champion, boxing or taekwondo or kung fu. Could he have? Possibly. I mean, he was that level of athlete. Maybe. Died at 33. Did he burn himself out from too hard of training, too hard of drugs, too hard of, burning the candle at all ends? Hard to say. I like the guy. None of this was to trash mouth him. I tend to imagine him as a guy that probably did anything to achieve his goals in a time when cocaine and hash and opium and steroids weren't quite the same. They weren't on. It was 80 years ago. I mean, we've had the war on drugs since then. Back then, he was a San Francisco college student. Probably tried everything. Then when he broke his back, probably tried things. Did that lead to his death at 33? Couldn't tell you. Because I loved his son as an actor. Ooh, his son could act. Great athlete. So, hey, happy birthday, Bruce. Light years ahead of your time. But boy, did you just leave more questions than answers. 5 movies, maybe a couple maybe a few fights on film that weren't choreographed. And then stacks of books. He put out mountains of his own. If you actually go read his books. But boy, just an encyclopedia of myth and legend and question. Could he have fought today? Was he on anything extra? Did he have extra normal abilities? Was he as strong as a 200-pound man? Did he even get there's a whole school out there that says Bruce Lee wasn't even trained real kung fu by Ip Man because he wasn't 100% pure Chinese. Because of that Master Ip wouldn't teach him the truest, deepest kung fu, and that the Bruce Lee you see was watered down. He had to go find other arts because his kung fu wasn't pure. To that I say you can find a lot of kung fu guys getting knocked out by MMA guys lately. So I give credit to Bruce for being a great pioneer of the philosophy of mixed martial arts. Probably a tough guy. Probably beat me up. Would he beat up Cody Garbrandt? No. Would he beat up Jean-Claude Van Damme? No. But God bless you, Bruce. Happy birthday. Like, subscribe, share, fight with me. God bless you.